Hello, students. In this lecture, we'll be looking at the topic comprehension passage. Now, this topic is quite interesting as well as simple because solving a comprehension passage cannot be described through a lecture. It is a subjective process. The solutions would change from person to person. So, when we get a comprehension passage, it would be quite different the way I look at or the way I adopt in order to solve the passage. So, it would change from person to person. But even then, when solving a comprehension passage is a time bound activity, or maybe an assignment or a test, in such cases, we can learn certain tricks in order to finish off the task in a limited time period. So, that is what we will be discussing in this lecture. So let us look at what comprehension passage would be. A comprehension passage would have certain paragraphs or a passage or a story which presents the perspective of the author. Now, it would be the ideas of the author that is conveyed through the passage. Sometimes it would be a story, or sometimes it would be something like an essay. So, it would be the perspective of the author that is presented to us. Now, when we are reading this comprehension passage, what we as readers try to do is decode the meaning intended by the author. The author might have thought of something while writing that passage, and we as readers should try to find solution or try to decode the passage. We are trying to understand the passage. So once we understand the passage, we will be able to draw conclusions from this passage. We will be able to make our own conclusions based on the passage that we have read. So that would be this entire process. Now, when we are looking at a comprehension passage, there should be certain skills that we as readers should possess. We should have advanced vocabulary skills and grammar skills as well. So we should be able to identify the meaning of the words. Certain cases, there would be certain words which we are not familiar with. In that context, what we have to do is we have to assume a meaning out of it by looking at the words before and after. If there is a difficult word, we look at the words placed before that particular word or after that particular word, and we can try to assume the meaning. It might be correct, it might not be correct, but still we can make an assumption over there. So like I mentioned, it would be a task for us in order to understand what the author intended, and from that we will be deriving a conclusion. Now, there are certain steps. When I started off with this lecture, I pointed out that solving a comprehension passage is subjective. So, the tricks used by each individual would be different. But, like I mentioned, when it is a time bound activity, if we have certain tricks in our mind, already set in our mind, when we approach a comprehension passage, we can finish the task off in minutes. So here I have listed down a few steps that we can follow. We can start off by skimming the passage. Now, skimming would be quickly reading through the paragraphs. So we are just rushing through the paragraphs. We will look at certain words, certain keywords. Now, when we are skimming through it, there might be certain words that catches our attention. It might be because of the length of the word, or it might be because of the placement of certain alphabets in the word. So when we read it, there would be certain words that catches our attention. So what we can do is maybe we can highlight it, circle it, underline it, so that when we look at the passage again, we'll get an idea of what or where we had read that particular word. So that would be skimming. The next step would be scanning. Now, if we have enough time, what we can do is we can scan the paragraph. So we can read carefully each and every word. We can read the passage very carefully and then go to the question. But now, if we don't have time, what we can do is we can scan the question instead of the passage. So, when we scan the question, we read the question very carefully. So, there would be again certain keywords in the question. What we have to do next is to align the keywords in the question with that of the keywords in the passage. So, earlier, when we were skimming through the text, we had certain highlighted words, certain phrases highlighted. What we can do is we can try to align the words in the question, the keywords in the question, to that of the keywords in the passage. This we can make a connection and figure out the answer. That would be the last step, which is solving. We have to solve the questions provided. So that would be the last step. So we can start with skimming, then scanning, and finally solving. So, what would be the different types of paragraphs or passages provided to us? We can categorize it into four different types, starting off with narrative. Narrative passage would be, like I mentioned earlier, the author would be trying to narrate a story, tell us a story. There would be a proper chronological order, a linear plot structure would be there. That is what a narrative passage would be. Descriptive passage would be where something is clearly described to us. In detail, something is described to us. Then the next would be factual or expository or informative. Here, the author is not trying to narrate a story, is not trying to describe something, but rather just explain. Maybe it's like a guide or an instruction manual. That would be what an expository passage would be. And finally, we have argumentative or persuasive. Argumentative or persuasive, like the name suggests, the author would be trying to persuade us with the words or with the sentences or with the passage. So the author would be trying to change our perspective and make us follow the perspective of the author. That would be a persuasive or an argumentative passage. So these would be the type of passages provided to us in comprehension passage questions. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we have to have a trick in mind in order to finish off the task in minutes. So I hope you have understood this lecture. We'll meet you later. Thank you.